Now, I've actually had the Insta360 One-R setup. I had the Twin Edition, which is basically this 360 camera and this 4K camera right here. For the past about 6 to 7 months, I was actually one of the ones that was on the early release production models back in January, and then they of course released this thing at CES 2020. And a couple months ago, I was finally able to get the 1-inch sensor of this setup right here for the One-R. And if you're not familiar with the Insta360 One-R system, I actually have a video that I did a while back when they released it. So make sure you guys check out that video above or down below. It gives you a lot more detail about what this whole system is about. And to be completely honest with you, when they first released it, while the entire system is very unique and very well done, they did have a lot of firmware issues initially at launch. So I wasn't really able to get into detail with a lot of this gear. But now that's been out for the past 6 to 7 months, they've done firmware updates all the time, and now it's actually a pretty solid system. So in this video, I'm not going to go into every single spec and every single detail, mainly because I can make videos on each one of these modules, each one of these lenses. I just want to go through with you guys my experience for the past 6, 7 months now of using the system, things I really like about it, some pros and cons of each thing, and talk to you a little bit more about those in this video. And if you guys are new to my channel, my name is Anastasio. I do a lot of drone tech, tips, tutorials, and product reviews right here on this channel. So if that's something that interests you, please consider subscribing and also hitting that bell to be notified when I post new videos. And a quick overview for those that aren't familiar with Insta360, I actually purchased the Insta360 One a few years ago and then moved over to the Insta360 One X. And then also I have the Insta360 Go. And then most recently now, of course, they released this new modular system, the Insta360 One-R. And when you talk about action cameras, of course, you have to talk about things like the GoPro. This is the GoPro Hero 8, as well as DJI's Osmo Action. And these are your pretty standard action cameras, but the one thing that Insta360 did was they made it modular. So not only do you get a action camera that has a pretty standard 4K lens on the front, you also have the ability to switch it up. So if you're shooting at a regular 4K camera like this, you can then pop it off of the screen, plug in your 360 camera, strap the battery on there, and then now you have a 360 camera. And then if you wanted a little higher quality image, all you have to do is pop this off, switch out the 360 camera, put on the 1-inch sensor. Now you're gonna have a action cam that has a 1-inch sensor on it. So if you didn't have an action camera, you didn't have one of these, but you were looking at getting one, but also were interested in something like 360, you're able to get this, which is a twin edition set, which has the 4K camera as well as this 360 camera for a little under 500 bucks. If you were to get two separate devices like a GoPro Hero 8, which runs around $300 to $350, and get something like the GoPro Max, which is like about $500, you're gonna spend over $800 to get those two separate cameras. Now the first lens we have here is the 4K. This actually shoots up to 4K at 60 frames a second on this lens right here. This is also an f2.8 and has a 16.4 millimeter lens on the front. Now comparing this with some of the other ones that are on the market like the GoPro and the Osmo Action, the colors are very similar. There's definitely some differences between them when you start seeing them side by side. Now the one thing that really sets Insta360 apart is their software. The way they have what they call flow state stabilization, which is very similar to something like Rocksteady on the Osmo Action or Hypersmooth on the GoPro. If you wanted to have a fully stabilized image, the one thing that's kind of troublesome with the One-R is the fact that you always have to run it through their software in order for you to have something exported out that you're able to use in your editing program. Now you are able to shoot and save this out as an MPEG-4 directly from camera. However, you're not going to be able to have the full stabilization built into it. You're going to still need to run that through the software if you want all of those features. Now, even though you have to process it through Studio, the one thing I did find that's very beneficial with it is that the Insta360 actually always shoots in that ultra wide. That is kind of cool that you're able to change field of view after the fact you've shot. That's something you can't really do on some of the other action cameras. Now, while using Insta360 Studio is probably the most optimal way to get the most out of your footage, there is a plugin for Adobe Premiere. However, I use Final Cut, so unfortunately, I'm not able to just take the source files from here straight into Final Cut and start editing. I have to run it through Studio and then get that as an exported file from there and then bring that exported file back into Final Cut. So hopefully they'll be able to do something just like they did with Adobe Premiere. And then when you're done using the 4K camera, if you wanted to switch it up and go 360, just take this apart, put the 360 cam on here. And once you get all three parts together just like this, now this is actually waterproof. And I think that was one of the biggest downfalls with the Insta360 One-X. While I really liked this camera, the one thing you couldn't feel comfortable doing is using this, whether it's in the water or snowboard or anything like that. This was not waterproof, but this 360 camera, as well as this right here, is waterproof once this is all assembled together. Now, the one thing I really like about Insta360 and their software is that you don't have to really point this at anything in particular. You just have to have this up on a selfie stick and just hit record, because everything is going to be recording no matter what you're shooting at 5.7K. And once you're done recording, all you do is take it back into studio, and then you can actually see everything that you've shot in 360, and you can set keyframes if you wanted to have it pointing in a particular direction, and you can reframe everything later on. So it's one of those things that makes it super easy, because all you do is really have it out and hit record, and then you go back into post, reframe it, and then there you go. You pretty much have your shot. You don't have to worry about trying to get everything in frame like you would with something like this. So if you were looking for a 360 camera anyways, I think I would definitely go with this over the One X, because of the fact it's waterproof. I think when you think of an action camera, you always think about taking it into the water, not having to worry about dust and debris. That was one thing that, even though this was able to, take with me snowboarding, I didn't feel comfortable with it, where here it feels, well built, and it is waterproof. So I didn't have any issues with it when I took it up to Tahoe with me, snowboarding, putting it on my helmet, having this on a long selfie stick. At least I know that when I drop this in the snow or in water, it is waterproof once you have this thing all connected. Now, one thing I did notice with the Insta360 One-R a little bit more than the One X was I did see a little bit of this reflection of the lens. I thought it was initially this red dot from the record button right there, that record light, that angle right there. But even when you turn that light off, you sometimes, depending on the time of day you're shooting, will see this kind of reflection in your video. So that was one thing I saw a lot more with the One-R versus the One X. Now, if you wanted to have a little higher quality in your video and photo, they actually have this module right here, which is a 1-inch sensor, which is also built in conjunction with Leica. Now, besides getting a little higher quality image, photo, and video, the one thing I do like is that does this have a 14mm lens. So sometimes when I would use this for vlogging, I didn't have to have my camera super far away. I can actually have it pretty close to me, because that 14mm is really wide. Really worked out good when I was using this for just handheld vlogging. Now, some of the benefits, of course, for having a larger sensor is that this will do a little bit better in low light scenarios. So if you are shooting something in the early mornings or later in the evenings, or something indoors, you're gonna have a better image quality coming from this larger sensor. But the one downfall I did see with this, even though it is a larger sensor, the aperture only goes down to an f3.2, where here this goes down to a 2.8. Some of the other cameras also go down to about a 2 to 2.8. So I really wish that this camera had a little bit larger of an aperture, something like a 2.8 or even larger than that. That would have been really nice. But the fact that it has a 3.2, I was kind of bummed on that, because I felt like it's kind of counterproductive in a way to have, yes, it's a larger sensor, but then you're not able to bring in even more light by having a bigger aperture. So, but overall, the picture quality of the 1-inch sensor is a little bit better than, of course, these right here, mainly because of that sensor. The one thing that is a little frustrating, though, is that when you want to switch this out, you're not easily able to put this in and out of the case. So unlike these lenses right here, where you're able to have it all assembled and you can actually slide it directly into the case, with the 1-inch sensor, you actually have to remove this outer glass right here, which is a protector for your lens on the 1-inch sensor. Then you're able to put this into the case like so, and then you put the protector back on. So if you did have to switch from lens to lens a bunch of times, this is just an extra step that you're going to have to take in the field. And the one thing I think they're doing, of course, is trying to future-proof themselves a little bit, maybe at least for the next couple years. So if they come out with another lens for this camera, all you have to do now is just buy the lens. You don't need to buy a whole new action cam. Ideally, you'll just have to buy whatever new lens they come out with, put it onto the screen, put that back onto the battery, and then you have almost like a whole new, action camera experience without having to buy a whole new setup. Now, of course, with every first concept of an action camera or camera in general, there's always a lot of things that I would like to improve on. And for me, I look for more of the user experience stuff that I like to improve, not necessarily just how the picture looks and some of those things. I look on how you use it, what are the things I'm interacting with a lot more, and how do I improve those things. So one thing I do hope that they update in the future is the speed of which this thing turns on and records. Now it's a little slower, and by a little I mean half a second, quarter second slower than something like the GoPro or the Osmo Action. Now that for me kind of adds up in time. So if I want to go shoot something and I hit record, it's a little delayed compared to some of the other ones. Also, when it comes to the touchscreen isn't as smooth as some of the other ones. It is a little bit choppy. I believe they did a firmware update on the app, but they still haven't completely fixed it or made it as smooth as some of the other ones. It does feel a little bit choppy when you're going through the menu system. So hopefully that just might be another update that they're able to do. Now, when it comes to menu selections, one of the things that I noted to them is that when you are looking at what's active on your screen, they actually have it in red. Now, for me, I don't really think of having something that's active in red. I normally think to have it possibly in blue or another color. For me, red normally means there's some sort of issue or it's not available. But for here, if something is active, it's actually in red. So that might be a personal thing, but for me, red normally doesn't mean it's active. It means it might be not working or disabled or there's an error with it. Now, as far as internal audio, it actually is pretty good, but the thing is, just like all the other action cameras, I really hope we go away from having to get these adapters. I'm sick of having to carry around another USB-C to a 3.5 on all my cameras, and they're all different and they all don't work with each other. That's pretty frustrating. I hope a lot of future action cameras just have something like a 3.5 jack on the side. I think the one thing that Insta360 does have over a lot of other people is their software. They are kind of breaking the mold of action cameras, especially with something like this. I don't know if this is going to be the future of where other action cameras are going to go, mainly because of the fact that some people don't want to deal with necessarily having a lot of different moving parts. They just want to attach it to something and let it go. So I'm not sure if this is going to take over that action camera space, but I definitely like the fact that they're filling a new kind of category, a new void of action cameras or cameras in general by building this type of modular system. Overall, the Insta360 One-R definitely is worth the price, especially if you're getting something like the Twin Edition. You get a regular 4K 60 frames a second camera and this 360 camera. The 360 camera alone, I think, in conjunction with their software is pretty much worth the price. Of course, all the links to these products will be down below in the video description. So if this is something you want to look into, definitely check those out. As always, if you guys got some value from this video, don't forget to hit that like button, and also don't forget to subscribe. Hit that bell to be notified when I post new videos. This is Alton Stasio with FlytPath.com. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.